Chapter 6 of Boruto's Tubular Vortex officially out, the streets are buzzing with conversation around the chapter. You know me, dog. I'm all about the streets. I don't know why I said that. But anyways, on those historic streets, people can't seem to decide what part of the chapter they want to talk about most. See, well, a lot of people, it's me, want to talk about Boruto using Purple Lightning, and more specifically, try and triangulate where Boruto would learn Purple Lightning in the first place. There's other people who want to talk about Shikamaru and how it's insane that he was able to break out of omnipotence with intelligence alone. And not only break out of omnipotence, but also deduct exactly how his memories were altered, that being that Boruto and Kawaki's positions were switched. However, somewhat unsurprisingly, the thing being talked about more than Purple Lightning and more than Shikamaru's incredible intelligence feat was the upcoming fight between Boruto and Mitsuki. And honestly, that tracks. See, because we're trying to figure out where Boruto got Purple Lightning is interesting, to me at least. The answer is most likely far away, and therefore the satisfaction of talking about something like this is months away from ever happening. On top of this, while Shikamaru may be aligning himself with the main character of the story, he himself is not the main character of the story, and is definitely not fighting. And since this is a shonen anime with a shonen audience, it would make sense that people would get most excited for the boys to do some punching, especially when the boys throwing those punches are the main character of the story and his former best friend who's apparently strong enough to slump Kawaki in one bite. But the general consensus revolving around this fight is that Mitsuki doesn't stand all that much of a chance. Genuinely, up until Mitsuki decided to one-shot the dude who was supposed to be the second strongest person in the entire universe, assuming you don't take into account the giant god who occupies his own dimension, who we don't really understand fully yet, I would have agreed with you. I would have said that there's absolutely no way that Mitsuki stands any chance in a battle against Boruto. And even after Mitsuki decided to put Kawaki down for a little nap, even Boruto, who's absolutely a better judge of in-universe power than us, believes that the fight won't be all that hard for him, telling Shikamaru and Ino that he has to take care of a little business that'll just be a little rough for him. And while there's a couple of different ways to interpret what a little rough is, it kind of sounds like Boruto is minimizing the strength of his opponent, Mitsuki. But genuinely, who's to say that Mitsuki at his current power level wouldn't be strong enough to battle against Boruto? I mean, sure, the only feat that we have from post-time skip is the slumping of Kawaki, which admittedly was a surprise feat. Then immediately after slumping Kawaki, he tried to do the same thing to Boruto, but Boruto was fast enough to react to it and get out of it, which doesn't look great for Kawaki's odds. What also doesn't look great for Mitsuki's odds is that when he shot a bunch of snakes out of the ground, that not only did Boruto react to the snakes coming out of the ground, but he also jumped out of the way of them. And on top of that, it seemed as though he was poised to destroy all of the snakes, but he realized that the attack would be too large and would possibly hurt Sarada, and thus Boruto seems to believe rather confidently that he can go toe-to-toe with Mitsuki with next to no effort. As let's not forget that throughout the entirety of these two exchanges that he had with Mitsuki, he never even activated his karma. So Boruto believes that he's able to wipe out an entire army of snakes generated by Mitsuki without the usage of his karma marking. One could argue that with his karma marking, he could probably beat Mitsuki with one arm behind his back. And in fact, he's already cut through a fair amount of Mitsuki's snakes, as when he activated Purple Lightning and applied it to his sword, he was able to slice through Mitsuki's chakra snakes. But it's not like any of the moves that Mitsuki used against Boruto were his Indra's arrow. Mitsuki attacking Boruto with his chakra snakes generated by his Snake Sage mode is akin to Mitsuki throwing a kunai at Boruto. So maybe, just maybe, Mitsuki is stronger than even we realize. Now, do I think that Mitsuki's unrealized strength is going to be enough to propel him to be stronger than Boruto? Not really. Boruto is the main character of the story and just spent 3 years training with two of the strongest people the ninja world has ever seen, all while running away from a person who, for about 3 years, was the strongest dude on Earth, who not only was the strongest dude on Earth, but also had an army of 10-tailed soldiers. And Boruto, in pretty much the first chance he got, one-shotted that supposed to be strongest character on Earth. And therefore, you could say that the training went pretty well for Boruto. Much better than his father's training went. I mean, really, when you think about it, all that Naruto achieves during the time skip with Jiraiya is kind of getting a grasp of Kurama. Like, he leaves the village knowing Rasengan and Shadow Clone, and he comes back to the village knowing Rasengan and Shadow Clone. And while I'm not the kind of person who's gonna be like, oh, what'd they do for all those years? Because it's been shown to us multiple times, it just kind of goes to show that Boruto is in a class of genius that unfortunately even Naruto can achieve. On top of that, technically it appears as though Naruto had more to overcome than Boruto, as Momoshiki seemed to have taken a backseat in Boruto's life, and Kurama never really did that for Naruto. And that's probably why Boruto came back with Flying Thunder God Rasengan Uzuhiko and Purple Lightning, and probably some other things that we just haven't seen yet. But with all this in consideration, is there any chance that Mitsuki is as strong or stronger than Boruto? Well, if he is, then my god, do we need a dissection on how Orochimaru made him. I understand that he was like the 40th edition of Mitsuki, but still. Because if Mitsuki is as strong or stronger than Boruto, then that would mean that Mitsuki is stronger than Jigen, which would be fully wild. So does this mean that Boruto is going to mop the floors with Mitsuki in the upcoming chapters? No, probably not. You see, there's a growing sentiment online that I'm not quite sure I agree with, that in the upcoming chapters, instead of seeing a grueling death match between two star-crossed best friends, or yes, former best friends, and instead we'll possibly be seeing Mitsuki either coming to grips with the fact that his mind has been altered, or we'll straight up just see Mitsuki admit the fact that his mind was never altered and that he's been acting incognito for the last couple of years. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about the possibility that Mitsuki is either unaffected by omnipotence or has broken out of its effect. That's because today we're talking Mitsuki's master plan revealed. Before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me revealing things, then you're gonna love my OnlyFans. I mean my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime. If you want to see me reveal things about my life, then you're gonna love my anime podcast, Talks Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you want to unreveal yourself, then go ahead and meander on over into my merch store, takusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. But before we get into all that, today we should talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Factor. It's a new year, which means it's time to crush those resolutions. And if any of your resolutions are either getting in shape or eating better, then Factor's got you covered, as Factor allows you to choose from 35 chef-crafted recipes every single week that not only support a healthy lifestyle, but also help you be as picky as you want to be. Whether you're looking for calorie-smart options, vegan options, veggie options, or even protein-plus options, Factor has got the diversity to keep you happy. And while a lot of people worry about making their carbon footprint larger by buying into weekly meal delivery services, with Factor, you don't have to worry about that, as Factor offsets 100% of their delivery emissions and source 100% renewable energy for the production sites and offices. Listen, when it comes down to companies that I advertise for, Factor is by far and away my favorite, because without Factor and me having to worry about what I'm going to eat for lunch, I wouldn't be able to get nearly as many videos done as I currently do. But convenience isn't all that I get with Factor. I also get delicious, healthy, and dietitian-approved meals every single week. But there's a big difference between telling and showing. So let's go show.
Today we're going to be making herbed Greek chicken and tomato penne.
I should know how this works by now. All we gotta do is take that off, poke a couple holes, toss it in the microwave, hit that big old 2 button, and we'll see you in a second.
But now for the most important part, taste test. That sauce is perfect. The noodles, perfectly cooked. Couldn't have done it better myself.
So what are you guys waiting for? Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code NCHammer2350 to get 50% off your first order of Factor today. So, will Chapter 7 look like a death match between Mitsuki and Boruto, or Mitsuki finally coming to Boruto's side after all this time? Well, most people on the internet, rather interestingly, seem to believe it's the latter. See, people believe that there's many times that Mitsuki could have become privy to information that would have allowed him to come to the conclusion that his memories have been altered. And some people even go one step further than this and say not only is there plenty of times that Mitsuki could have realized that his memories have been altered, but that he's already beginning to show signs that he knows his memories have been altered. And thus, not only do we have a theory, but we have a possible confirmation. And thus, the real conclusion to this theory is that people believe that the reason that Mitsuki is following Boruto all the way out into the woods isn't to kill him, but rather confirm these suspicions. But in order to address a theory like this, we have to start this video off in the way that we tend to start these kinds of videos off, by answering the easy questions. And there's 3 parts to this theory. Mitsuki has become privy to information that's made him doubtful. He's already begun to show the signs of that doubt, and he's following Boruto to confirm those doubts. So let's start with the first third and ask the question, how would Mitsuki have become doubtful of his own memories in the first place? Well, the first point that people are using to argue this theory is that there's a possibility in Chapter 6, when Ada, Daemon, and Kawaki are talking, that Mitsuki overheard that conversation. Now, for those of you who don't remember what that conversation was about, essentially Ada, Kawaki, and Daemon were talking about the Shinju, and how the Shinju had decided that they were going to try to kill people, and one of those people was Naruto. And during this conversation, Kawaki says, well, it doesn't matter if they're coming for Naruto because Naruto is in my pocket. That is to say that Kawaki's saying that I have Naruto stowed away in the Daikoku-ten. And Daemon responds to this by saying, well, yeah, sure, they may not be able to access Naruto, but people coming to Konoha looking for Naruto will confirm the fact that he's not actually dead, and thus the illusion of your omnipotence genjutsu will begin to break. And thus, during this conversation, Ada, Daemon, and Kawaki are all but pretty much revealing everything that has been altered worldwide. And not only are they revealing that, but they're also revealing the fact that they themselves were involved. And thus, this theory states that Mitsuki was privy to the information that was being conveyed in this room, either because he had the room bugged with one of his little snakes, or because he was right outside when this conversation was being had. And if we know anything about ninjas, it's that their senses are a bit more heightened than ours. Now, we know that Mitsuki was right outside because the second that Kawaki storms out of Ada's house, Mitsuki is standing there, right by the door, waiting for Kawaki. And when Kawaki gets all upset with Mitsuki for always being around, Mitsuki says that he's there because he was assigned by the 8th Hokage to protect Kawaki and Ada. And now, genuinely ask yourself, if Mitsuki was assigned to protect Kawaki and Ada, would he ever let them go from his sight? The answer is probably not, and thus the possibility that Mitsuki was snooping on this conversation with one of his drone snakes is actually pretty high. Because while one could say, oh,
Mitsuki wouldn't snoop on their conversation because Mitsuki's a gentleman and Mitsuki has manners.
no, he isn't. Mitsuki was made in a tube. He's barely human, and he's shown time and time again that he doesn't really understand human interaction. And therefore, the idea that Mitsuki either placed the snake on Ada or Kawaki, or just placed the snake in Ada's house to keep an eye on everything going on to make sure that they were safe is not only not crazy, but it also just makes a lot of sense. And thus, upon hearing about this obvious betrayal, Mitsuki would realize that Naruto isn't dead. At least, according to Kawaki. And therefore, if Naruto is not dead and Kawaki knows something about it, not only is something wrong with Mitsuki's memories, but Kawaki, whose memories are clearly different than Mitsuki's, must have something to do with the memory alteration. And therefore, the natural conclusion to come to with this information is that Kawaki was the source of this possible genjutsu that Mitsuki was placed on. On top of this, people believe that Mitsuki doesn't treat Kawaki like he treats Boruto, or I guess like he used to treat Boruto, isn't because Kawaki's son is now a moody, grumpy bitch that's tainted Mitsuki to now be a darker reflection of the moon, but because deep down, Mitsuki knows that Kawaki is actually the bad guy in this equation. Thus, Mitsuki simply has to bide his time until he can create an opportunity for Boruto, his real son, to return. So with these events as possible indicators of Mitsuki's freedom from omnipotence, people have begun to speculate what will happen in Chapter 7 won't be a death match between Mitsuki and Boruto, but a confirmation of these doubts for Mitsuki. But how will Mitsuki go about confirming these doubts? Well, there's a couple of ways he could. Some which I find compelling, and others which I find rather boring. See, if you're looking from a straight up find the most logical answer standpoint, the most likely way that Mitsuki would realize that Boruto is Boruto and not Kawaki is surprisingly something that I haven't seen anybody bring up yet. And that's possibly because it is incredibly boring, but genuinely, when you think about it, it makes the most sense. Because genuinely, the easiest and most efficient way to swing Mitsuki to hashtag Team Boruto, and therefore have one of the most powerful characters in Boruto on Boruto's side, is just, link him into the conversation that Shikamaru is having with Boruto, right? I mean, Mitsuki, right before going after Boruto, called Shikamaru up on a secure line. And now that secure line was through the detection agency, which Ino runs, Ino is currently running a separate secure line for only Shikamaru and Boruto, using her mind transmission jutsu, which has a range of 100 kilometers. And since Boruto and Mitsuki are not 100 kilometers from Konoha, as Boruto was still talking to Shikamaru right at the ending of Chapter 6, Shikamaru could very easily just have Ino either add Mitsuki to the call or just link his mind to Mitsuki. And Shikamaru could just go, hey, this is gonna sound so super silly, but that guy you're currently trying to kill, yeah, that's your real son, which is a call my father never got. However, unfortunately, this answer is incredibly anticlimactic. Imagine Boruto and Kawaki standing across each other, poised to kill each other, and then you just kind of see the zap drawing, and it's like, hey, Mitsuki, don't do that. Like, obviously, the easiest way to tell Mitsuki that Boruto's a good guy is to tell Mitsuki that Boruto is a good guy, but wow, would that be boring, which is why sometimes we gotta throw logic out the window. And sometimes when you throw logic out the window, you find more compelling answers. And the most compelling way, to me, at least that I've thought of, as to how Mitsuki will realize that Boruto is Kawaki and Kawaki is Boruto, is for Mitsuki and Boruto to go about their battle like it's a deathmatch. I mean, I've already established the fact that it's a shonen manga. It's gotta have some good fights. However, while Mitsuki and Boruto are battling battling it out, Mitsuki begins to recognize patterns in jutsus that Boruto is using. Patterns in jutsus that Mitsuki has seen the person that he believed Boruto to be in his mind use before, which would make Mitsuki ask the logical question, okay, why is Kawaki fighting like Boruto? In fact, why does Kawaki fight more like Boruto than Boruto fights like Boruto? And thus, slowly but surely, throughout the duration of their fight, Mitsuki would realize that, oh, Kawaki is Boruto. And all of the hours that Mitsuki and Boruto spend sparring will come back to Mitsuki, and to begin to realize that the way that Boruto is fighting is so familiar because they grew up as friends. Not only friends, but teammates. And thus, as these doubts begin to creep into his mind, it sends Mitsuki into an existential crisis. Because the last thing that Mitsuki would ever want to do is hurt his son. Once again, Dad can't relate. The best example of this would be Chozo with Yuji at the end of their fight. As Chozo began to realize that Yuji was his younger brother, Chozo, who's incredibly obsessed with keeping his brothers safe, began to realize that he almost killed his last remaining, well, technically alive brother. Chozo has other siblings, they just haven't been given form, and they've possibly been eaten by Yuji, but that's a whole other can of worms. That's actually more like a whole other tube of Death Wound paintings, but you get it. And thus, as these physical memories come back to Mitsuki, he either realizes that Boruto is his friend and embraces him and joins his side, or gets overwhelmed by the sensation and flees the sea. But these aren't the only ways that Mitsuki could realize that Boruto is Boruto, as the last way that Mitsuki could realize that his memories have been altered is by losing to Boruto. Which sounds silly, but hold on. See, there is a possibility that Mitsuki is fighting Boruto to suss out his own suspicions. More specifically, Mitsuki is battling against Boruto to see if Boruto will kill him. And if Boruto does try to kill him, then surely Boruto is capable of killing Naruto. My memories were correct. However, if Boruto has the opportunity to kill Mitsuki and doesn't take it, then there's no way that this person who had way more connection to Naruto than he technically should have to Mitsuki could have killed Naruto. And therefore, if Mitsuki had heard of the conversation between Kawaki, Daemon, and Ada, this would confirm the suspicions that he was already beginning to have. And while I do genuinely believe that the reason that Mitsuki knocked out Kawaki was a good reason, that being that Boruto also has the ability to sense Kawaki even if he's erasing his chakra, and therefore if Kawaki was looking for Boruto, Boruto would get spooked and leave Konoha. And I also know that no amount of convincing would ever stop Kawaki from trying to find Boruto, and thus knocking him out was really Mitsuki's only option if he wanted to battle against Boruto and possibly bring him to justice. Mitsuki also could have knocked out Kawaki to be alone with Boruto to confirm his suspicions. And while all of that is great, there is one point that people have been using to argue that Mitsuki isn't trying to kill Boruto that I simply don't agree with. So people are saying that Mitsuki was able to track Boruto outside of the leaf because he already had a snake on him. Now, it's safe to assume that Mitsuki probably placed this snake on Boruto when he first wrapped him up, as Mitsuki was possibly aware that Boruto would be able to break out of this snake wrapping. And thus Mitsuki, who has the understanding that Otsutsukis can fly, understood that there's a possibility he was going to have to track down Boruto, and thus snake. The craziest thing about this snake that Mitsuki places on Boruto is that he doesn't sense it until it's much too late. And therefore people argue that the snake that could have bitten Boruto at any point didn't. And thus this must be a clear indicator that Mitsuki has no intention of killing Boruto, because the snake could have bitten Boruto at any point and knocked him out, and Mitsuki could have finished the job. But that's a ridiculous argument. One, different snakes do different things, and the snake that Mitsuki used to bite Kawaki was very noticeably an armed snake, as we see the second that Kawaki identifies that Boruto is in the village, that Mitsuki turns his hand into that of a giant snake. And we've never seen any of Mitsuki's tiny little white snakes act offensively at all. They're mostly used for exactly what Mitsuki used them for in this scenario, tracking. And two, if Mitsuki could go the sneaky snake route, why wouldn't he open with that? Why have a giant snake wrap up Boruto and try to bite him to inevitably have Boruto hip thrust his sword out of its hilt and jump away? Why not just throw one of the little snakes onto him, have that bite him because he wasn't able to sense it, and then GG's? Well, I guess technically people could argue,
Well, because he didn't want to knock him out.
but it's silly to me. Different snakes do different things. Different toads do different things. Different birds do different things. Not one snake can do everything. Aoda and Manda can smash things. Mitsuki's snake arm can poison things. And little white snakes can either compose Orochimaru's body or act as tracking beacons. That's just kind of like the letter of the law in Naruto.
But okay then, Nick, if you disagree with his opinion, what's your opinion?
Thanks for asking. My page, after all, probably give one. Well, my personal opinion on the matter of what's going to happen in Chapter 7 and what's going on in Mitsuki's mind is that Mitsuki, like the rest of the human population, was fully altered by omnipotence, and that he is genuinely trying to kill Boruto. I mean, Mitsuki did wrap up Boruto and fully tried to bite him with a giant snake. And while one can make the argument that, oh, Mitsuki knew that Boruto would be able to escape that, why? Why would he know that? Mitsuki hasn't seen Boruto in 3 years, and nobody really has a full grasp of how he escaped from Konoha in the first place to chase after Code. But I do believe that over the course of Mitsuki's fight with Boruto, memories of the old version of Boruto will begin to creep in. And now, while this doubt will not be enough to sway him immediately, one of the more possible compelling storylines coming up in Boruto is that somebody as passionate about their idea of who they believe Boruto to be, slowly but surely realizing that over the course of the last 3 years, the version of Boruto that they fell in love with, essentially, has been ostracized and criminalized by the entire world, and Mitsuki has bought into that worldview. And all of this happened because of the person that over the last 3 years Mitsuki has been thinking of as his son. And thus Mitsuki not only has to come to grips with the idea of who his actual son is, but also what to do with Kawaki, who he probably still has feelings for as his son, even though that son tried to hurt his real son. At least that's what he thinks. And rushing that character arc would be a legitimate crime. See, I love Mitsuki. He's one of my favorite characters in Boruto, and this is most definitely the kickoff of what could be his greatest character development arc yet. And therefore, for a somewhat selfish reason, I believe that Mitsuki will lose this fight. But Boruto will spare him, which will allow for the doubts that Boruto may actually be a good guy to creep into Mitsuki's brain. That, paired with the slight feeling of remembering Boruto's moves, will slowly but surely begin to walk Mitsuki along the path that is realizing that Boruto was ostracized for no good reason, in that Mitsuki's son, the most important person to him on the entire planet, hasn't been protected by him for the last 3 years. That's something that I believe will genuinely shake Mitsuki to his core. And watching the rebound of emotions that Mitsuki goes through when he realizes that Boruto is in fact the good guy will be a legendary moment. Because if you think the emotions that Mitsuki is currently feeling towards Boruto are cool to watch, wait until he realizes that all of those emotions were meant for Kawaki. And since it's already been established that Mitsuki stands a fair to good chance against Kawaki, since Kawaki's probably going to be pretty upset with Mitsuki when he wakes up, I'd say if you're going to be excited for a Mitsuki fight, be excited for his fight against Kawaki. But then again, what do I know? I'm just a man who reads this manga professionally. What do you guys think is going to happen in Chapter 7? Do you believe that Mitsuki's going to come to grips with the realization that his memory has been altered, or do you think he's genuinely trying to kill Boruto? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. If everybody could stop commenting about how Mitsuki's snake rose when he saw Boruto, that'd be lovely.